Hello chess friends and welcome to Zadov's chess channel and welcome to the Computer Blitz Chess Championship in 2020. We have reached the semi-final stage. So far 6 engines are left battling for the throne, but first they have to play for the super final. So far the standings are like this. Stockfish NNUE is in the lead. Stockfish Classic is on the second place. So it's really incredible. We could see maybe in the super final a battle between Stockfish NNUE and the Stockfish Classical version. It's really incredible. Stockfish is really now the alpha and omega in chess. But now from the semi-final, I decided to show you one game between Stockfish NNUE and against Stockfish Classical. It's really an incredible win over French. As I said, be prepared again. Really some madness that NNUE created. So as usual in the top engine games, we said round one and fight. So d4 here by NNUE. The classical version of Stockfish plays e6. We have e4, d5, knight to c3, and after bishop to b4, we have the French win-over variation. And here the main line is of course e5. We have knight to e7 and now a3. Bishop takes c3, b takes c3. We'll stop a little bit and evaluate now the position. What's the main strategy about this kind of pawn structure? What we can always notice, it's of course the directed pawn structure. We have now pawn chain, which is basically showing us the direction of our attack here from white's perspective, and also this pawn structure is showing black the direction of the attack. So that's why white has to be fast here on the king side with h4, h5 moves. Black has to be fast with c5 ideas, knight to c6, maybe even queen to b6, queen to a5, attacking here the pawn chain somehow. So that are the main strategies. Let's see now what happened here after the move c5. Immediately we have h4 played by Stockfish and NNUE. Stockfish Classical plays the queen to c7. We have rook to b1. Here b6 was played. We have h5. What we don't want to do, that's the importance about this move h5. What we don't want to do is allow here black to build some kind of a blockade with h5, maybe g6, then knight to f5, really fixing the whole king side. That's something that we shouldn't allow here black to do. So that's why this h5 move very important, because if black solves the positional problems on the king side, that's the most important thing, then I think it could be basically a one-way ticket here for black. Black will trade off, for instance, this bad bishop for this bishop, and white could continue the game maybe with the bad bishop a little bit here, the dark square bishop, as it's a little bit blocked out by this centralized central pawn structure here on dark square. So that's why this b6 idea is really an idea to get this positional trades of pieces and trading off really the bad piece here. It's a bad bishop on c8. So h5, as we said, we have h6 and now queen to g4. Really the most aggressive line of the win-over. We have now king to f8 and now rook to h3. Here in the game, bishop to a6. As I said, the idea is clear. We want to get rid of our bishop. If you try c takes d4 here, it's not so strong because c takes d4 can happen, and if you try to take, then bishop to d3, we get some extra tempos against the queen to c3, maybe again bishop to d2. I don't think that you gained anything here because you have to retreat here with the queen. Then we can play rook to c1, and now it's time really to push here. White has really a nice attacking setup. The problem is now you cannot take this pawn. You're staying on the same rank like the rook, but still we could try maybe something like rook to g3. You see how bad this position can be, and now you get something like bishop to h7. Very risky here for black. So that's why let's go back. C takes d4, you see, it's not an option immediately, although black would love to play that move and somehow maybe create some attacks against the king, but so far not possible. So that's why bishop to a6. Here bishop rook to f3 was played. In the game, king to g8. If you try now to trade off finally these bishops, it's not good because you get queen to e6, and you see we have now an immediate checkmate threat. You have to play something like knight to c6, and now we can take. We have grabbed the pawn. It's perfectly fine. I think this is a bad position because we can also attack this pawn, of course, take it. Black has to react. We can improve, of course, our bishop now finally to f4, but now the bishop is not blocked out because there's no e6 pawn anymore. We can always advance the pawn and liberate this diagonal where the bishop is perfectly fine again. So that's why king to g8 was played after the move here, rook to f3. You see the tactical threats around the square e6. We have queen to f4. also again attacking the f7, so that's why knight to c6, protecting everything. And now we have bishop to d3. The problem now for black is if you play bishop to d3, c takes d3 will happen, and after something like maybe c takes d4, c takes d4, I don't think that you have gained so much, although you have again forced a little bit of bad bishop position. But I still think that white can even go into a very nice defensive setup. It's really cool thing here. I think we can go bishop to d2 and even king to e2. I don't think that the king on e2 is vulnerable to any attacks. The problem for black after the move, if for instance you trade off the bishops on d3, that you cannot fix the knight on c4. You would love to do that. Knight to f5, knight to c4. That's where you should basically activate your knight, and that's the problem. So that's why here after the move bishop to d3, Stockfish Classical doesn't go for the trades of pieces, because still we can maybe afterwards then play knight to a5 and then knight to c4. This is basically a weak square in white's position here on the 4th rank. So in the game, knight to d8, bishop takes a6, finally knight to a6, and now rook to g3. Simply remaneuver the pieces. We're targeting now a new square here on the board. It's of course the weak square g7. That's why rook to h7. We have bishop to d2, protecting everything, and now knight to c6, knight to f3, simply improving the position of minor pieces. We have rook to c8. Now finally black built this attack. The target is maybe here the weak c2 pawn, also the c3. Still we have opportunities to play knight to f5, knight to c4. In the game, king to f1, bringing the king in security, because if we manage to get our king somewhere here, maybe on h2, it's not a problem. I don't think that white king can be endangered, but the problem is always this weak pawn structure. So as I said, if black manages to do something here, then it's of course perfectly fine. It's not the problem about the king security of white. It's simply maybe grabbing some pawns, securing the king somehow here, and maybe black could make also something happen in this game. So here knight to e7. Again, if you try c takes d4, we'll simply take. Here if you try knight to e7, again to fix the knight, then we can c3, we can play c3, protect everything here. The bishop is perfectly fine here. We are again targeting here somewhere around the square h6, g7 that are our targets. The problem is again that black cannot play this outpost of the knight on f5. We still can challenge the knight with knight to h4 ideas and play something like knight takes f5, queen to f5. So again, c takes d4, you can make that, you can play that, but it doesn't bring you so much. Again, I think the only good positional way is maybe to fix the knight somewhere maybe here on c4, if the position allows it, maybe on b3. So knight to e7, we have king to g1. You see the king is perfectly fine here, although we didn't castle here. Queen to d7. Now comes this idea, knight to h4, knight to b8. If you try knight to f5 to fix everything, it's not so good. You see how important this pawn here on h5 is. It blocks really the potential idea of g6, maybe to create a compact position. Then we can simply attack c takes d4. Here c takes d4, but you lose also this pawn here. We have opportunities, as I said, here on the f file. So it's not so easy for black to fix the knight. In the game, knight to b8 was played, rook to c1, knight to c6, maneuvering the knights all over the board, searching for good squares in the position. Bishop to e3, we have c takes d4, finally, c takes d4, and now king to rook to h8. Rook to f3, again attacking the f7 weakness, queen to e8, queen to g4, and now king to h7. Bishop to d2, rook to c7, protecting also here our 7th rank. Very important, because how to approach this position from white's perspective, where should we attack? The only flexibility that we have here is maybe here pawn breakthrough motif with g4 g5, maybe even prepared f3 g4 g5. So that's the only way to split the pawn structure in front of the king, to create some kind of a weakness, because so far black has played a very nice defensive setup. The knights are perfectly fine here. They will find a way into the game. But as I said, the blockade idea, the blocking idea by black is the main defensive idea. Then when we regroup, when we cement everything, then we could search for counterattack possibilities maybe on the c file. So c3, knight to a5, as I said, finally this idea to get this weak square here, maybe c4, or also another weak square is the square b3. So that's why rook to e1, because you risk some fork ideas. Knight takes b3, knight to b3, then knight takes d2, and then maybe the c3 is a weakness. So here that's why rook to e1, we have knight to b3, but now bishop to f4, and everything is perfectly fine here still for white. We have protected the third rank. Again, we have restricted this knight's ability to jump on f5. Very important setup here by white. So rook to c4. We have queen to h3. Now we're searching for our attack with g4, g5. In the game, king to g8, and now g4 finally. So it seems to me now that black's attack on the queen side is splashed, that black doesn't have now so many flexible moves. We cannot even create this this battery on the c file. Everything is protected. If you move the knight somewhere, still the bishop then can retreat and protect the c3. If you go maybe after this pawn with rook to a4, I think it's simply too slow. You need one tempo, maybe two tempos to take the pawn. Then maybe again get the back with the rook. You need 4 or 5 tempos in order to maybe grab a pawn and retreat with your rook back into the defense here of the 7th rank. It's simply, I think, too slow. White is threatening immediately the move g5. So here rook to h7. We have king to g2. This is a very important move because you see how white is glued together with the pieces. They're all compact here around the king, and still we have the flexibility to create some kind of an open position. But now it's time really to improve the position of the rook. We can use this rook on this also on the h file, the queen on the g file, and the rook on the f file. That's how you aim with your rooks and the queen against the king. So queen to d7, we have queen to g3, rook to c8. You see Stockfish Classic went with the rook here, then retreats back. Again, not the best of moves. Maybe rook to a4 finally to grab at least one pawn, and maybe, I'm not sure if that works, but maybe to try to push this pass pawn. Then I'm not sure. Here in the game, rook to c8 was played by Stockfish Classical, and then now comes this idea g5, h takes g5, bishop to g5, and now knight to f5. Although we can maybe even take knight takes f5, it takes f5, then maybe queen to h3 or rook to h3, rook to h1, then queen to h3, taking out this pawn. Still, Stockfish NNUE is really now a positional monster. Plays this game very, very slowly. Slow build up, slow attack. Queen to g4. Here, king to f8. If you take knight takes h4, then again queen to h4, and we have now the opportunity to split the pawn structure in front of the king with the potential h6 move. Then we can provoke some dark square weaknesses because black doesn't have any more the dark square bishop. It's a very risky position around black's king. So the only good way, I'm not sure seeing good ways anymore here for black in the game. Queen to g4, we have king to f8, we have rook to h1, knight to h6 here by Stockfish Classical, and now we have queen to f4. Even if you, instead of this move, king to f8, play the move knight to h6, again, nothing has changed because bishop takes h6, rook takes h6, and now rook to g3. You have to protect everything, and now h6 again. You have to make maybe some risky g6 ideas. Very, very, very messed up. Then we can play f4, f5. Very, very, as I said, really weird position. If you try g6, I'm seeing maybe even some tactical threats with knight takes g6, queen to g6. Okay, maybe we can hide, but still maybe queen to f6 then follows. It's maybe even a checkmate. So okay, in the game, that's why here you see knight to h6 wasn't played, king to f8, we have rook to h1, knight to h6 again, trying this blockade idea, but now queen to f4. Again, we have a battery on the f file. You see how Stockfish NNUE uses the spaces. In the game, we have knight to f5, we have rook to h3, king to e8, queen to g4, knight takes h4, and now rook to h4. We have a5, and now finally this pawn breakthrough motif that we have searched for, opening the position in front of the king. h6, we have really infiltrated in black's camp. Now g6, but now queen to f4, here rook to c7, and now a4, blocking first the position here on the queen side. We have knight to a1, and now queen to f6. In the game, queen to e7 was played, but there is one problem about this move. Of course, you lose the exchange because we'll simply takes and bishop takes e7. But if, for instance, even black tries here to play the move king to f8, now you have really a nice tactical shot. I've analyzed this position. Pause the video, maybe I tried to see if, for instance, black would have played this move. So test your might in chess. Try to see now really a great continuation. You see how this dark square problems can cause you really even some checkmate threats if you don't have a good protector, of course, like here the dark square bishop. Here a nice tactical shot is, for instance, to sacrifice the queen. Queen takes queen to g7. You have to take h takes g7. Again, you have to take bishop to f6, and now after king to g8 we have rook to h8. So really a nice queen sacrifice it would be if black wouldn't have played here the move queen to e7, but this is the line that Stockfish Classic played. Queen to e7, queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes e7, rook king takes, and now c4. Very important move to liberate now our rooks. g5, rook to h1, knight to c2, and now c takes d5, e takes d5, and now rook to f6. It's really a weird position here for black. It's simply lost. You're always stuck to the defense of this pawn here. Knight takes d4. Okay, and you can take one pawn, but it's not a problem. We can take out this one. We can take out this one too. So here in the game, Stockfish NNUE even sacrificed the rook back for the exchange, but it's not a problem because what we want to do is, of course, to play much more active with our king. Here, rook to h6, h8, the promotion, trades of rooks, and now after king takes g5, it's obviously a winning endgame here for white. Incredible positional game. You see, it's not so tactical, this Stockfish NNUE, how it's played, but great setup that Stockfish NNUE builds, moving up, improving the position of any minor piece, building activity on files, on diagonals, really nice attacking formations, great attack again against such a great opponent like Stockfish Classical. As I said, so far these two engines are on the first two places. We'll see how this tournament will go on, but I really wish to see maybe this as a super final, maybe when we see maybe some king gambit lines or maybe some tactical lines, we can maybe even see that Stockfish Classical could even beat Stockfish NNUE in some maybe dubious openings. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more brutal positional and attacking games like this, check out my commented chess games play by computer series. Here's the link. And if you want to see the humans battling in their best chess games, check out my commented chess games, the best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.